2025 has been a surprisingly solid year for first-person RPGs. Outside of Avowed and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, we were also given a huge surprise with the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remaster. It's only May, and there are still several titles, including The Outer Worlds 2, that have yet to be released. That brings us to today's game, Tainted Grail: Fall of Avalon, that is finally coming out of early access. Developed by Awakened Realms, this first-person RPG places you in the Arthurian legend where the king is dead and the world is in complete chaos thanks to the weirdness and other disasters. I've taken a look at this title many times in early access and really enjoyed what I've seen. Now that it is finally out of early access, is it worth picking up? Also, as a disclaimer, I did get an early release build from Awakened Realms 7 days before the actual release. While I do appreciate the free code, it will not deter me from a fair and honest review. Sounds good? Let's begin. So when you start the game, you are given an introductory cutscene as well as the ability to create your own character. At the start of early access, it was pretty basic in terms of the selection available to you. I'm happy to report though that the character creator has expanded with many new faces, hairstyles, and even face and body art to add to your character. You then pick your difficulty, which I picked the Adventurer difficulty, which is considered the standard difficulty for this game. Fall of Avalon has been compared to Elder Scrolls many times, and it starts right away with you waking up in a cell. Considering the Oblivion Remaster was just released, this is one hell of a coincidence. From here, you're asked questions by a guard on your background. This will determine some of your starting stats and if you have any starting spells. For our character that I named Zonalda, we will make her a magic user who starts off with the Life Leech spell. We will also have her use one-handed weapons at the same time, really giving off that hybrid Skyrim playstyle. As expected, you will not be in this asylum for long as you are rescued and it is time to get the hell out of this island. If you've played many first-person RPGs, specifically from Bethesda, you'll fit right at home with how to interact with the environment. If you see the button to interact with an object, chances are you can pick it up. There's quite a bit to find, including books, spells, equipment, and a ton more. Considering that this isn't a AAA game in the slightest, it's pretty commendable the amount of content here. And content there is a plenty, with a playthrough ranging anywhere from 50 hours to 70 hours. Heck, even the prologue itself took me 45 minutes to leave the asylum and explore the world proper. The game is divided up into 3 acts, with each act being represented by a particular region. Each area features its own biomes, enemies, NPCs, and rare loot to find. Safe to say, it's a long game that does a great job to keep the player entertained throughout. I also apologize that I'm not doing a straight-on progression like I normally do for these reviews, and it is very hard not to spoil the game. Even though this game has been in early access for 2 years, both Act 1 and 2 as well as the prologue were redesigned in a way that affects the overall narrative. Revelations that were made at the end of Act 1 now happen at the end of the prologue, meaning the game takes an unexpected but welcome turn compared to early access. To sum it up without giving too much away, the game revolves around Avalon and the world now that King Arthur has passed. The world is in a much worse state as corruption runs rampant, diseases spread like wildfire, and the world has become genuinely inhabitable thanks to the weirdness. Camelot needs a change, with the return of King Arthur being the catalyst for better or worse. That is, this isn't the first time King Arthur has been resurrected, and your role ultimately determines what the outcome will be. It's an overall very compelling narrative with an amazingly dark world to explore. The world is described to be in a permanent autumn, and that can definitely be seen especially in the first 2 acts. Despite this game being on the Unity engine, the world is absolutely gorgeous to explore with a great use of autumn imagery. The armor and weapons you can find also look fantastic with their dark fantasy visuals. They even added a third-person view and a photo mode to help capture these moments, although both are pretty limited at the moment. The third-person mode especially needs some rework and smoothing out, especially for the animations. While there is a ton of stuff to do, the main focus is going to be on the combat. First-person melee combat is always a tricky thing as it never feels quite right compared to third-person combat. Thankfully, Tainted Grail: Fall of Avalon features some of the best first-person combat I have ever experienced. Outside of the wide variety of weapons and spells to choose from, you are given a great amount of defensive items, including blocking, dodging, parrying, and even sliding of all things. Using these to your advantage opens up the enemy for an effective counter strike. It also helps that the AI is more than competent, meaning that you can't just swing away expecting victory. This is where the Dark Souls inspiration can be felt, or maybe even a shout out to Kingsfield or Shadow Tower. The only issue I have with the combat is how some enemies can warp to you, making it a bit harder than expected to dodge attacks. Still, it isn't something that can't be overcome, as I mainly dodged and struck my way to victory. In early access, the magic system was the least developed, with a lack of spells and build variety. That has thankfully been addressed with a plethora of spells ranging from buffs and debuffs to pure offensive firepower. Heck, you can play the game as a summoner with several creatures to use at your disposal. Summons especially are a lot of fun, as you are able to bring 3 with you at the time to start. This can further be upgraded to even more summons at a time. It's pretty fun mixing and matching the different creatures, or saying screw it and creating an army of wolves. It's been a while since I've had this much fun with a magic system. Like any open world RPG similar to Elder Scrolls, there are a crap ton of side quests to complete. Thankfully, these are very well done, with many solutions and paths to discover. While you do have the fairly standard bounties and fetch quests to find, there are plenty more that deal with various guilds, as well as personal side stories to explore. One of my favorites involves a curse that you accidentally trip while trying to do some research on an ancient druid site. At first, you think it may not be a big deal, but you come to find out that this is a legitimate problem that even the best of medics can't solve. Without giving too much away, you'll need some druid magic to get rid of this druid curse. How you find this and the resolution was a nice twist and a great way to showcase how the events of the world has impacted the daily lives of its inhabitants. And all this combat and questing leads to experience points and leveling up. In general, you improve your skills by performing them repeatedly. So for example, running and sprinting will increase your athletic skill, while using magic will increase your magic skill. You'll also gain 1 attribute point and 1 skill tree point after leveling up. Attributes include strength, stamina, dexterity, spirituality, practicality, and perception. Each point added to an attribute increases certain variables for your character. For the skill tree, there are a ton of them covering all aspects of your character. It takes some time figuring out each skill tree and how to ultimately spend your points. Thankfully, there are ways to respec your character if you feel like you've made a mistake in your build. As much fun as enjoyment I've had out of this title, Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon is unfortunately plagued with several technical issues. For one, the performance is very hit or miss. I'm using a 7900 XTX and I have had several micro stutter issues, especially in the open world. This game also seems to slow down to a crawl when I begin recording gameplay footage. The only time this would happen to me is back in the day when I used Fraps over a decade ago. There's also several quests that are bugged, voice lines not playing any audio, and some minor graphical glitches. Thankfully, I haven't had any crashes, but your mileage may vary. Some of this was addressed during the early launch period, with several more intended to be fixed on release. However, I can only comment of what I've played so far and not will be in the future. Early on, I praise the amount of loot that you can find, but I do have one issue with a new addition. In early access, you can freely mix and match your equipment regardless of your build. Now, you have very strict attribute requirements that are pretty brutal early on. In the early game, you'll find many pieces of armor better than what you currently have, but you can't use it as you'll need to invest points into your attributes. Since you only get 1 attribute point per leveling up, you will need to wait until you are level 10 or more to finally use a better weapon or a solid piece of armor. You can technically use equipment before you meet the requirements, but you won't get the full benefits of it. And as satisfying as the ending is, the third act is the weakest one in my opinion. Sure, the final location of Forlorn Swords has some absolutely breathtaking moments, but there just wasn't that much interesting to find. There's also an appalling lack of merchants and even a lack of endgame loot to find. Most of my final weapons and armor came from Act 2 and Kunichet. I only found 1 weapon in Act 3 that I used in the final boss battle. The rest of the weapons and armor I found were either weaker than I had or didn't fit my build. At the end of the day though, none of these issues were big enough to ruin my experience or prevent me from finishing this game. Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon is a very strong recommendation from me. Combat is great, the build diversity is much appreciated, and the dark fantasy world of Avalon is very worthwhile to explore. While I am hoping that the bugs can be addressed, the performance to improve, and the equipment restrictions to be loosened up a bit, none of these issues are showstoppers by any means. It's an overall great homage to many RPGs that I've played over the years, with a bit of Arthurian magic thrown in. I'm curious now where Awakened Realms goes from here. This was easily their most ambitious title to date, so I'm expecting at least 1 or 2 major updates going forward. Maybe a new area to explore or some additional quest lines to further flesh out what is already there. Only time will tell, but the $45 price point is well worth the experience. Thank you all for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse signing off.